So I think the long-term impact, number one, is increased adoption, and it's accelerated. We've seen 10 years of acceleration in 8 months in this B2B e-commerce field.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Traditionally, B2B businesses have been relationship-based. However, in the modern digitally centered buying process, 70% of the buyers are now fully defining their needs on their own before engaging with a sales representative. B2B businesses need to critically review their go-to-market strategy before it's too late. COVID has further fueled the rise of e-commerce. Also, with Facebook buying customer, we are going to see a convergence of B2B and B2C. And marketplaces such as Amazon will play a key role in the success of B2B businesses. In today's episode, we have our guest Brian Beck from Ansiba, who discusses key trends in B2B commerce, including the rise of Amazon's prominence in B2B product research and buying, and why manufacturers and distributors should be paying attention and acting now. We also touched on the digital transformation landscape for B2B e-commerce businesses and how CEOs can begin their journey of e-commerce enablement. If you're looking for research-based insights from an industry expert, longtime practitioner, and author who spent 4 years interviewing your peers and competitors, this episode is a must-listen for you. Let me introduce Brian to you. Brian Beck has 20 plus years of experience, including more than a decade as a hands-on C-level e-commerce executive. Brian currently serves as the managing partner of Ansiba, the industry's only Amazon consultancy focused on serving the B2B industry. And he is the author of the first comprehensive book on B2B e-commerce entitled Billion Dollar B2B E-commerce. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey Sam, I'm glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, amazing. I'm super excited to have you as well. So to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and what
Sure.
you are focusing on these days?
Yeah, no problem, Sam. Well, hey, again, thanks for having me. So yes, I'm a 20-year veteran in the e-commerce field. I've been an executive in charge of e-commerce, as well as a CEO and COO at companies throughout the e-commerce field. A lot of my career was spent as a e-commerce exec for retail and consumer brands. And Sam, I got into the e-commerce field for B2B about 5 years ago, advising companies on how to develop their e-commerce and digital transformation efforts for companies, again, that kind of B2B manufacturers, distributors, folks who really have had no real history in selling or leveraging digital to reach their customers. And Sam, it's when I got into doing this, I was asked by my clients, "Hey, is there a place I can go to read about these how to do this?" And gosh, I couldn't find anything, so I decided foolishly to write a book. And I thought, well, gosh,
it's never foolish to write a book, Brian. Okay, you are being super humble here. And by the way, you mentioned 20 years veteran. Yeah. When I talk to book author, typically that's going to be 20 times 4. So you are 80 years veteran.
Well, it feels like 80 years. Thank you, Sam. Yes, I ran e-commerce for a number of companies, and successfully, thankfully built some companies' e-commerce efforts to over $100 million in revenue, and so I did some things right, I guess, and I wanted to put that into writing because what I realized was that without a resource like a book, People didn't have a good foundation. So I basically wrote my 80 years. You're making me older, Sam. I took my 80 years and wrote it down.
Sometimes you don't know how your jokes are
That's right.
going to come
That's
across,
right.
man. I'm
That's
sorry.
right. So this thing is so the book is called $1 Billion B2B E-commerce, and it's 400 pages long. It's 12 chapters, but it's really every element that a B2B company needs to build their digital transformation, right? It's everything from the leadership and the organizational elements that are required to managing channel conflict, aligning your selling channels, making sure your sales force is aligned with what you're doing in e-commerce, to building a technology foundation. Really, I mean, this requires an investment in technology to do this well, and then how to market, how to deal with and manage your presence on marketplaces like Amazon, and really adopting the principles of B2C e-commerce for B2B success. There is so much we've learned, Sam, over the last 20 years from our work with B2C e-commerce. There's so many best practices that have been well established now, and your B2B buyer today expects those from you, right? So, interesting fact, Sam. Within 3 or 4 years, I think by 2025, 75% of the B2B buyers are going to be millennials. These are people born between 1980 and 2000. These people are Amazon natives, digital natives. They use Amazon for almost 100% of their online shopping, at least a portion of it. So these folks are coming to you, your website, your e-commerce, with an expectation that you're going to deliver something like that. And if you're not, guess what? Those customers are looking elsewhere. So there's a real mandate, and frankly, this whole event with COVID has just accelerated everything that's going on in the market. So, it's a mandate. It's a call to action, and the book. I didn't time it this way, but when it came out earlier this year, Sam, it was. It just
Nobody timed
I
it,
know
Brian.
it just you can't right and who would wish this on anybody, this global pandemic, but frankly it's been a resource for a lot of companies. I get calls from these companies and their whole executive team has read the book and they've got it all earmarked and they've got post-it notes sticking out, and it's great. And that's really I am grateful and thankful that that people have found a lot of use for this book. So anyway, that's there's a lot of concepts in there, so I'd love to dive in on whatever you want to, Sam. I'm yours.
Okay, amazing. So it's kind of interesting the way you mentioned the millennial term, and I think I made it in that bucket by a year, and I can tell you that I'm very hard to please.
Well, good. I've called you young. I don't fit in that anymore, so I missed it by almost 10 years, but darn it. But
so so today what we are going to be discussing about is what you are going to do to please me as a millennial.
That's right. That's right.
All right, so we are super hungry for growth as millennial. Yep. Okay, so the next question, and we follow this ritual here. We ask this question to every single guest that we get on the show. So what is your perspective on growth?
Well, gosh, it's really the whole subject of the, what I wrote about. Growth, the digital has become the center of everything, and it is the key to growing a business these days. And I talk about this not only in the from the standpoint of digital enablement for commerce, right? Because that's important. But it's also, if you think about, particularly with COVID, the physical doors being locked, you've got to digitally enable the sales team as well. So if you're a B2B company, the mandate for digital as the driver for growth just got a lot louder, right? So I think, when you think about the return on investment, the ROI, right, from an investment in digital commerce and digital enablement, it's a lot of it is about meeting that need, and it comes from places like incremental revenue from e-commerce. It comes from obtaining more share of wallet from existing customers. It comes from capturing new markets by leveraging e-commerce. Gosh, I've got several case studies in the book that talk about companies of all sizes, ranging from smaller companies, 10, 20 million in revenue, all the way up to multi-billion-dollar enterprises that have captured more revenue and entered new markets using e-commerce, finding customers niches they've never had before, and doing so through reaching out in e-commerce. Being found, for example, in Google. I have one case study in there of a distributor, for example, that almost doubled the size of its business by leveraging e-commerce. Why? Because they're getting new customers from Google searches that are finding them in geographic markets they never historically never served. I've got another case study of a manufacturer that is achieving millions in new revenue by reaching beyond the OEMs. This company in particular makes metrics measurement tools. They've always sold to Boeing and all these big OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. Now they're reaching into new markets. They started selling their products to bicycle shops because they had no idea that these people could use their products, but now they're finding them on Google, and these are hard to find tools. So it's a real, growth, Sam, to get to your question, growth is digitally enabled, right? And so whether that's e-commerce or helping your sales team reach customers because they can't get in to see people due to COVID and other things, it's just it's a steroid, right? It drives growth for you if you do it right, and that's what I talk about a lot is how to do it right. Make sense?
Makes sense. And I know that I'm making you feel old, but based on the number of pages you have in your book, I think I have underquoted you. I think I should have quoted you 160 years, to be honest. Okay, because the amount of learning and research you guys have, and you mentioned that you have done 100 interviews with
Yeah.
different CEOs, and you have tons of case studies. So yeah, the amount of insight that book authors bring to the table, it's phenomenal, and it's just so much learning for manufacturers and distributors. So the next question I'm going to ask you is, and I find you guys as to be predicting what is going to happen in the market. So from the macro perspective, what is your perspective on e-commerce? What is your perspective on how COVID is going to change the e-commerce
Yeah,
market?
great question, Sam. I mean, I think, again, I think you have that expectation now of e-commerce. And so, look, there's some statistics around what COVID has done. And now, the most striking, I think, is some data I saw recently. It was from Forrester and Bank of America, which showed that the penetration of e-commerce in the United States went from about 16% right before COVID to over 30, I think almost 35% now. What I mean by that is the amount of people using e-commerce, B2C, B2B, to interact, to buy products. So it's doubled, right? So I think number one, you're seeing that customers are now reliant on e-commerce. Now, the long-term implication of this is that people that were reticent to use e-commerce earlier, and in particular, I'm referring to B2B buyers, right? You have a good example of this would be, maybe your heating, ventilating, air conditioning contractor or your electrical contractor, or people that, maybe hadn't used e-commerce in the past, now are learning how to use e-commerce and are finding that in many cases, it's easier and more efficient for them to do their job. And once you show people that this is an easier path and saves them time and in some cases money to to use e-commerce, they're not going back. They're going to stick with e-commerce because look, at the end of the day, particularly in B2B, if you make the buyer's job easier, they're going to continue that behavior. So I think the long-term impact, number one, is the fact that you're going to see increased adoption, and it's accelerated. We've seen 10 years of acceleration in 8 months in this B2B e-commerce field. So I think that's one. And then the other big one is I think you're going to see less people, taking appointments, physical appointments, and that's going to continue as well. So that means your sales force needs to continue to become digitally enabled. The physical sales force. I read a statistic, Sam, that said at the end of 2021, we're still going to have 30% of the workforce here in the U.S. Working remotely. 30%. That means that's 30% you can't get to. You're not going to go show up at someone's house to sell them a product. You have to reach them digitally. So it has implications for the physical sales force as well as the digital, right? So I think these are long-lasting implications.
So it's kind of interesting. I mean, when I used to think about e-commerce, I always used to think B2C, just because it has the commerce word in it. But lately, when I'm interviewing my guest, and I don't know if you know Kurt Anderson, I think you are
Yeah,
hanging out with him as well,
Kurt's
right? So we did
phenomenal.
an episode with
Yeah,
him, and he is super bullish on B2B as well. In fact, nowadays, e-commerce folks are not even talking about B2C. For me, when I think of e-commerce, I used to think that, okay, this is going to be my Shopify site where I'm going to have beautiful product. Maybe I'm going to have a cart where I can check it out. But you guys are talking about something different. So why is B2B different from B2C as far as the e-commerce landscape goes? And why is everybody trying to push on B2B
yeah,
now?
great. No, great questions. And by the way, Kurt is fantastic. I mean, he's I've done a couple things with him, and just super knowledgeable and amazing energy. So I'm glad to hear you've done some interviewing with him. So yeah, why is it different? Well, so it's a different customer, right? I mean, ultimately, B2C e-commerce, which is the field I lived in for 17 years, it's well established, highly competitive, very evolved, and it's still alive and well. In fact, same kinds of things are happening there with COVID that are happening in B2B. The fact of the matter, though, is that B2B e-commerce, in other words, businesses selling to other businesses via digital commerce, is far behind where B2C is. Only 50% of B2B firms have e-commerce capabilities. So, I'd like to say it's 10 to 15 years behind where B2C is. What's different about it, which was the core question? Well, what's different is that the B2B buyer, number one, has different goals and aims and behaviors when they use B2B e-commerce. The primary difference in their goal is it's all about efficiency. They're using e-commerce to get their job done, not to go, shopping and look for the next greatest look for my hairdo or or my outfit or whatever. I worked in the fashion apparel space for a while, and that was very much about immersion into an experience and getting people to engage with a lifestyle brand and things like that. So when a consumer shops, it's partially about efficiency, but it's also about fun and enjoyment and engagement in the experience of shopping. With business to business e-commerce, it's all about efficiency. You have got to get the customer to what they're looking for quickly, give them the information they need, and allow them to check out quickly. And they need to also do things that are specific to how businesses buy. So the other key difference is not only in the buyer's intention and behavior, but it is also about the expectation and accommodating their traditional workflows they have in their business. A good example: businesses often buy on credit terms, right? They're going to buy, a manufacturer, for example, will extend credit terms to its distributors to buy from it, or a distributor might extend credit terms to that contractor or the medical office or whoever's buying from them. And that workflow needs to be accommodated in the e-commerce arena. That doesn't exist in consumer in the same format. So buying on a purchase order, for example. Another big example of that is pricing. So in the world of B2B, many companies have contracts and they've negotiated pricing with their supplier. Well, when that supplier initiates e-commerce, they need to make sure that that pricing is reflected on the e-commerce website. One of the key ways to kill off an e-commerce effort is if you don't present the pricing the customer expects to see in the e-commerce effort. Guess what? Don't even bother starting. It's not going to work. The customer needs their customized pricing through the e-commerce experience in order to make the purchase. So those are some of the, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of differences, Sam, but those are some of the key areas of difference from B2C to B2B. But, the fact of the matter is B2B e-commerce is 2.5 times the size even today of B2C e-commerce. It's enormous, and a lot of people don't realize it.
Interesting perspective. And when we look at the B2B commerce term, and I'm going 20 years back, to be honest. So B2B commerce is not new. B2B e-commerce could be newer. And I think you guys are coining slightly newer term here. So when I think of B2B commerce, I used to think the portals such as Ariba or
Sure.
Coupa, and I don't know if you are familiar with
Yep.
them.
They used to be your supplier network. Enterprises used to work with them, and then they were your bidding platform. You could have your marketplace inside the office. So how do you differentiate between B2B e-commerce versus
Yeah.
B2B commerce?
Yeah. No, great question, Sam. This is so it's an interesting and evolving world. So you're talking about e-procurement, EDI, punch out. There's a variety of approaches to traditional sort of electronic commerce, and it's to your point, it has and continues to evolve. There is still a very significant role for those types of e-procurement systems. In fact, when we look at the world of e-commerce, it's very closely aligned, and I believe a lot of those electronic commerce formats. So the EDIs of the world, the electronic data interchange, and the e-procurement platforms will continue to exist. In fact, they need to. In many cases, they need to integrate and work with each other. So what I see happening, Sam. So those traditional platforms remain a very significant part of the volumes that are done between suppliers and buyers in B2B. Those are systems which, once they're set up, are efficiently can run efficiently. Oftentimes, the way companies will approach e-commerce is for a certain segment of their customer base, which is which particularly wants to use the e-commerce format. But at the same time, they're using those procurement systems alongside of them. So it's not a sort of rip and replace. It's an addition to. In many cases, in some cases, they're integrating or allowing the e-commerce platform. In some cases, will integrate to and support some of those systems. For example, if you're familiar, Sam, with the punch out, where a customer can order through their ERP system, leveraging their traditional purchasing paths. Some e-commerce platforms will enable you to support punch out and can be integrated into that system, so that it reduces some of the complexity of management. So it's so I don't view e-commerce as a replacement for those kinds of systems, but in fact complementary to, and in many cases will serve a different customer than the EDI customer or the e-procurement customer who's buying from a supplier. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm actually going to sort of rephrase my understanding of how I'm interpreting the e-commerce world, the way you are describing. So, in my opinion, B2B e-commerce has a lot of different benefits, because here you are trying to utilize the ROI from the Amazon marketplace, from the Google ads. But in case of your supplier portals, I mean, you are basically going after your existing relationships. Yes, there could be some of the newer relationships as well, but you are not going to be able to generate business. So am I accurate there in my understanding of B2B e-commerce versus the B2B supplier portals?
That's a great way to think about it, Sam. It's so you're in a closed environment with EDI or e-procurement, as you're describing them, and so you're not exposing yourself. Meaning your product offerings, your company, your brand, etc. Through those sort of closed environments, right? To reach new customers and to allow them to transact the way you've described it, that requires e-commerce. That requires a website that people can go onto. They can perhaps register, or maybe not even need to register to buy from you via your e-commerce website. And so, yeah, it's a way to reach into new customer segments. The case study I alluded to earlier, the company that is now selling to bike shops, they reach them through Google searches. And that other one, the distributor I referred to, their new customers are coming through Google searches on SEO. The same thing can happen with Amazon. If you have a well-functioning Amazon presence, then people are searching on Amazon more than ever, and increasingly B2B. So you've got another whole sort of platform there as well that allows you to reach new customers. See, a lot of it is about exposing more of, to exposing your product catalog and your brand to new customer segments.
And it's kind of interesting the way you put this, because even Kurt talks about the same thing. He is super super bullish on the marketplaces. He's super bullish on Amazon, and in fact, I'm going to connect this with the recent story that Facebook just bought the new CRM platform called Customer. So I guess they are probably trying to get some of that B2B revenue and the ad revenue as well, because everybody's trying to jump into this marketplace boom. So tell me why these marketplaces are going to be next Google, especially for B2B
Oh
companies.
yeah, I mean, look, it's not even going to be, Sam. They already are. I mean, if you look at, so a couple stats for you. If you look at Amazon and their division called Amazon Business, Amazon has become the number one place people go to search for products, and this is increasingly in B2B. Amazon is getting 70% of product search, where, in other words, where the product search starts. So people kick open their browser, and they 5 years ago they would go to Google and type in a product name. Well, that behavior has now shifted 70% of it to Amazon. And if you look at Amazon's B2B presence, Amazon Business has become the fastest growing part of Amazon. Period. I mean, I'm talking about all of Amazon, and that includes, so it surpassed Amazon Web Services earlier in 2020 in terms of growth rate. Amazon Business B2B transactions are projected to be, the latest numbers I've seen, over $70 billion by 2023. That's 3 years from now. That makes them, guys, 7 times the size of Grainger. Does anyone know Grainger on the call? I would say, or on the podcast here. A lot of you would raise your hands. Grainger is recognized as one of the largest distributors in the world. Amazon's going to be,
They are.
Amazon's going to be seven times their current size. Okay, and guess what? It's not all office products, right? They're selling. If you look at their where they're making progress, it's in things like MRO, industrial products, medical, dental. Last year, Amazon in the medical and dental space did over $2 billion in revenue. $2 billion, folks, and this is not just over the counter stuff too. If you're in the medical field, we're talking about regulated type 2, class 2 medical devices, which are regulated by the FDA. Amazon is putting in workflows to accommodate this. So, Sam, why marketplaces? Why is Amazon? Why are these other folks? Why are they growing so quickly? Well, frankly, it's that the marketplaces do a better job than most companies do with e-commerce. They provide more product. They provide an easy experience. They do the things like I'm talking about related to ease of purchase, removing friction, getting the customer in and out quickly. They are meeting the need of that millennial buyer I mentioned. They're already, in the case of Amazon, those buyers are already using the platform for their personal consumption. They're just shifting over to business. So, look, this is, a marketplace strategy. I always tell my clients this. You have to have a marketplace, and in particular, an Amazon strategy. Whether you're a manufacturer or a distributor, the implications are different. But having that strategy is critical, and that's a lot of what we spend our time on, is helping folks determine that Amazon strategy, because it's not easy. I mean, they're doing a lot of things, and a lot of things you have to think about as you approach a marketplace.
Yeah, and again, I find this whole Amazon thing very interesting, especially when I hear in the news that you need to be careful of Amazon. Mom and pop shops are gone because Amazon is just too big and too powerful. But here, actually, the sense I'm getting is it's the exactly opposite story, because Amazon is opening the door for you. You come here, you hang out in my premises, and you make money. So it's exactly opposite. Amazon is actually trying to help this, right, Brian?
Well, yeah. Well, I think look, a couple things. I think Amazon would say, look, we enable business. We actually enable a lot of mom and pop businesses, and that's very true. I talk to people all the time who have built very successful businesses on Amazon. Ultimately, I think what we have to realize, Sam, is that business buyers and consumers, where they shop, their preferences, you can't control that. As a business, you have to recognize how the world is changing around you and confront it. There was this great book by Jim Collins written, I guess almost 20 years ago, I think now, Good to Great. Maybe it was 10 years ago. And in Good to Great, he talks about confronting the reality of your situation. What do the best companies do? They confront and acknowledge the reality of what's changing, and they understand their customer. If you look at Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, and what he has preached for 25 years since he founded that company in 1994, he's talked about the customer incessantly and focusing on the customer's needs. and they do it. They're at 1 million employees. It amazes me when I talk to. I have hundreds of relationships at Amazon. When I talk to these people, they're all saying the same thing about the customer. At that scale, it's amazing what they've built, and to me that they continue to execute with that at the core of their kind of being. I think just is a testament to where businesses need to be these days, which is focused on the customer and recognizing how that is changing, how the world is changing. So to your question, Sam, yeah, I think Amazon is enabling. It enables a little guy, but it also causes all kinds of disruption if you're not paying attention to your customer. So you've got mid-market distributors, for example, that are losing market share right now to Amazon. You got manufacturers that are losing market share to other manufacturers on Amazon because they're paying attention and they're selling their products there. And some of these companies, guys, you've never heard of. These are manufacturers you don't know exist. The whole competitive landscape is changing. Go on Amazon, right, and search your product name.
That goes with any community, Brian. You need to be nice with the big guy. Okay, right. you can't mess with the big guy. As simple as that. Otherwise, they won't let you hang out in their premises, right? So as long as you are being nice with the big guy, you are good.
I think it's nice, and I think it's smart, right? You have to have the right strategy. You have to be smart about how you work with Amazon, and you have to be smart about, because there's a lot of things you don't control there. Even as a large manufacturer distributor, there's not a lot of influence you have. Even if you have influence in your traditional relationships, it's a different animal. It's a different way of doing business. Amazon is. So you have to be smart and informed, and have people by your side that know how to work through these things. So anyway, it'd be nice, yes, but I think the most important thing is understanding what's changing, understanding where your customer's going, and then have a smart strategy around all of it.
Okay, Brian, so we are running out of time, and I know that you wanted to cover the platforms as well, the rollout for B2B, the selection process. I don't know how much you can cover. Do you want to touch on that briefly?
Yeah, happy to. I know that was an area, Sam, you wanted to cover off on a bit, and I think I have a whole chapter in the book. Chapter 9 is all about platform selection and how to go about that. So I think there's two things I'll touch on there. One is that it's important to make sure you take your time when you go through this process. Too often I find companies sort of just go with the first one or two platforms they talk to because the sales pitch sounds great. You need to make sure you take your time and do a careful selection process, which involves customer input. It involves your other folks who are in your business, your sales team, your marketing, finance, fulfillment, etc. And you want to make sure you do that step up front. And it might take you 4, 5, 6 months to do that right. But you ought to come out of the other side of that, understand, with a platform that you can live with for a long time. And by platform, what I mean is software, right? So I think the first thing is making sure that you're taking your time with it. And then make sure you get, good partners alongside of you. Now, the good news is in all of this is that whole landscape, Sam, has evolved rather considerably over the last even 5 years. So there's a lot of options available to you in the platform marketplace, which is good news. And it's also bad news because you have to, you kind of have to decide between them. A lot of options, it can make the decision more difficult, but it's brought down the cost of ownership to get into and launch an e-commerce platform for your business. So, I think there's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of options in the market, and there's a lot of details to an effective process. But I would advise, my number one piece of advice in terms of that, establishing the right technology foundation, is take your time with it up front. You will thank me or your people or whatever later if you do that, because you won't have to rip and replace it in 2 years, which is never fun. So.
Okay, Brian. So in closing, there are two things I want you to cover. Number one, the advice for a CEO of a B2B firm, because you are well positioned in that. You are 160 years old. Okay. And the next thing I want you to cover is you are a super humble guy. You did not even mention the name of your business as far as I remember in the interview. So can you tell us a little bit about your business?
Sure, I can. Yeah, again, Sam, I believe in sharing value with folks, and as a first and foremost, not just shamelessly self-promoting. So, yeah, so I'll touch on my business a little bit, and then I'll offer some advice as in closing. So obviously I sell books, right? I'm an author. The name of the book is $1 Billion B2B E-commerce, and if you put a .com at the end of that, you'll get to my book website, and you can read about the book and contents, and also buy it. It's available on Amazon. So that's one aspect of what I do. The other is I own a company called Enciba. I'm a managing partner. I have some partners in the business. Enciba, Enceiba, Enciba. So if you put a .com at the end, our business is in helping B2B manufacturers and some distributors as well understand their Amazon business opportunity, the right approach to Amazon in terms of strategy, and then executing on that. So we have a team of folks based here. We're all here in the U.S., helping them to execute the content, the marketing, the advertising, the strategy, the fulfillment, et cetera, for Amazon and Amazon business. We're the only firm in the marketplace that focuses on the B2B aspects of Amazon. And so that's the firm. And again, enciba.com. So, and my email, by the way, if you want to email me, is brian@enciba.com, BRIAN@enciba.com. Now, Sam, to close this up, one piece of advice, thanks for that question. It's, and I talk about this in the book right at the beginning of it. And it's really about, and I have a case study on it. One piece of advice is take action. And this is directed right at the leaders, right? At the CEO, at the C-suite, at the VPs and the boards and the business owners. You don't have perfect information in this field. One thing I've learned in 20 years is, in e-commerce, things change all the time. You have to take action in order to succeed without perfect information. The tendency for B2B companies is to wait until everything is perfect before you take action. Tend to be very conservative. And that's fine, and it served you well for 100 years in business, or however long you've been in business. But ultimately, taking action is the key, and in the absence of perfect information, and get people alongside of you that can help you think through this and move. So I have the first case study in the book is a company called Petra Industries. They're I think about a 30 or 40-year-old distributor. Back about 15 years ago, the CEO said, "Gosh, I don't know exactly what's happening with this e-commerce thing, but I need to invest in it." And he took action. He didn't understand everything about it, but he learned along the way. He got people on his side, alongside him. And today they're a digitally evolved business. They get a lot of their revenue, I believe more than half of it from e-commerce channels. They're doing well in this pandemic situation because they've invested, because he made those investments and continued to evolve the business over the last 15 years. They've been able to succeed and capture new customers and increase their share of wallet from existing customers. And so, my advice is act and do so without, even in the face of the fear of not knowing exactly what you're getting into. Yeah, get people alongside of you that can help.
Yeah, the advice cannot be more real than this. So definitely take action and act. And on that note, Brian, I thank you so much for your time and insight. It's been super fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. This has been really great. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show and sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something today. If you want to learn more about Brian or Enciba, please visit enciba.com or his book website billionb2becommerce.com. He can also be emailed at brian@enciba.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Kurt Anderson from B2B Tail, who touches on what custom manufacturers need to know about starting their e-commerce journey. Also, the interview with Chase Clymer from Electric Eye, who brings a unique perspective on D2C from the angle of e-commerce toolset and Shopify. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.